Dreaming Spanish is an incredible resource for learners, but unless someone just completely lacks the discipline to hit the book and take one-on-one lessons in Spanish, it's just so inefficient. The problem is that people think they can get results using the lazy or easy way. Some people can learn languages just using CI, but for the vast majority of people, it's not going to work. If you don't crack a textbook, do you lack discipline? Is comprehensible input lazy? All I do now to learn Spanish is watch content I enjoy and talk to people that I like. And yet my Spanish keeps improving. And if I am improving, does it matter if comprehensible input looks lazy? What's going on, guys? My name's Nick. I'm the creator of Lengualytics, and I'm a fluent speaker of the Spanish language. In school, it was drilled into our heads that if something doesn't feel hard, then it's not learning. To learn, you have to be sweating, you have to be drilling, you have to be grinding your teeth, and if you're not learning. Not only do I think that's false, I also think it's very damaging, and not for the reason that most people would expect. But before we go any further, I do have to say the reality is comprehensible input is not easy. At least not in the beginning. I spent 3 to 4 hours every day giving my undivided attention to Spanish content that I was struggling to understand. And it wasn't always the most entertaining content either. That is not easy. Something that people overlook when they call comprehensible input learners lazy is that comprehensible input only does its job if you're truly watching the content with your attention. You're truly giving it your all to try to understand what's happening on screen. And giving comprehensible input your attention for 3 to 4 hours in a day is not easy. You know what people say about people's attention spans in 2026. I would have to take breaks between watching content, and at the end of the day, I was legitimately tired. But does it matter? Does it matter if comprehensible input feels hard? My opinion is definitely no. How hard something feels is not a good measure to decide if it's working. If you get it in your head that for something to work, it has to feel hard, then you're mistaking effort for productivity. The reality is you can work really, really hard and be completely unproductive. I see a lot of people in my comment section saying comprehensible input, grammar study, flashcards, language apps, they're all just tools in a toolbox, and you need to use each of them to learn a language. Now, I strongly disagree with that messaging, with that framing. I'm gonna explain why. The way I see language learning, I see 2 distinct categories. I see instruction, and that will be grammar, language learning apps, one-on-one lessons. All of these are designed to explain the hows and the whys of language learning. They clarify things, they organize things, they explain things. But the second category is something entirely different, and there's only one thing in this category. It's the thing itself. It's listening to the language, reading the language. It's not knowledge about the language. It's the thing that we actually want to fluently be able to speak and understand. That's what's so different about input, about listening and reading and consuming the language. It's not a tool in the toolbox, it's the actual thing we're trying to do. Because when you're fluent in a language and you encounter a native speaker, they're not gonna hand you a flashcard deck. They're not gonna hand you a fill-in-the-blank puzzle. They're just going to speak to you in the language. So that's the thing that we're all focused on becoming fluent in. It's different in substance than knowledge that's simply about the language. When people say grammar lessons, language apps, and comprehensible input are all just tools inside the same toolbox, they're not respecting the difference between studying the thing and the thing itself. They're putting instruction and the actual doing the thing on the same level when they're really different in kind. I play guitar, and I see so much overlap between guitar playing and language learning, so I'll ask this question. Who is the better guitar player? Is it the student that spends 100 hours doing guitar lessons but never practices? Or is it the student that does 1 guitar lesson but practices for 100 hours? Everybody who plays an instrument knows the answer to that question. The person who puts in the reps is always gonna do better than the person who only knows theory. I always say this because it comes up in every context, but the best way to learn to do a thing is to do the thing. In fact, I've noticed that doing too much instruction can sometimes be a defense mechanism. It can be a form of avoidance. Sometimes we hide behind grammar lessons and language apps, not because we need more knowledge, but because actually doing the thing would feel exposing. It would strip away our control. I'm not saying instruction can't help you, I'm just saying it's not a substitute for putting in the reps. You don't build your finger strength or solidify your finger picking patterns, or get better at transitioning chord shapes by being explained how to play the guitar. In the same way, you don't acquire a language by doing grammar exercise and fill in the blank tests. If someone confuses instruction for practice and they do less practice because it just doesn't feel rigorous to them, or comprehensible input or taking in input feels lazy, that's a really great way to plateau in language learning. You don't normally feel progress when you're acquiring input. There's very few moments where you say, oh, I just mastered that, like you do when you're getting instruction. It's more of a subconscious process. It's your brain wiring the sounds you're hearing to meaning, and this is all happening without you noticing. But if you're addicted to the feeling of learning a new rule or learning a new word, something concrete, you're going to plateau at the intermediate phase because acquiring input just won't feel rewarding to you. And in my opinion, that's the issue with this mental model of language learning, where we confuse instruction with input. And what bolsters my opinion on this is that people are talking about flashcards and language learning apps past the beginner stages. I don't know about you, but I really never enjoyed Duolingo. I never really enjoyed grammar lessons. I would prefer to get those out of the way as fast as possible. So when someone at an intermediate level says they're doing that stuff, it makes me pause. And I totally sympathize with the beginners out there who listen to comprehensible input and they say, oh, I just feel like I could supplement this and, not that much of it. I'm just going to supplement a little bit to understand more of this and more of that and maybe get some more compelling input. To me, that makes perfect sense. But in my experience, there does come a time when undoubtedly input seems to be the only activity you need to continue building fluency in your target language. Even if that's only 95% of your journey, like 5% maybe you're asking ChatGPT some questions or you're Google translating some things. Of course, but the idea that you're spending days of study, those things to me are relics of the beginner stage. So when I hear somebody talk about those things in the intermediate stage, it raises some alarms for me. And for that reason, I reserve a healthy skepticism when people in the comment section say they're fluent, but they still use other tools to help them with their language learning. Again, I do use ChatGPT sometimes. Why is this like that? I do use Google Translate sometimes. What the hell is una butaca? I never heard of that. Well, you keep hearing butaca in Harry Potter. You say to yourself, what the hell is that word? You don't know. You look it up. But that's just such a small sliver of my 3 hours of audiobook listening that I wouldn't call it study. I would just call it, I do the same thing in English. If I saw an English word, I don't know what it means, ChatGPT, Google Translate, maybe Urban Dictionary. And that's not study time. So if me sitting on my couch, drinking a beer, watching a Spanish movie looks lazy to you, that's fine. I'm not embarrassed about looking outwardly unproductive when I'm watching comprehensible input. The truth is, once you get really good at something, it tends to be a lot easier. And that's the most true for language learning. To me, downloading a language learning app at this stage just doesn't make sense because I feel like I've absorbed Spanish into my life. I don't necessarily feel like a language learner, though yes, every day I'm learning a language. I just feel more like a person, almost more like a child who's getting into the world of Spanish, right? When I listen to Spanish, it's because, oh, a YouTuber that I like made a video in Spanish. I'm gonna listen to it. A lot of you might not know this, but the cloud provider that Lengualytics runs on was founded by un argentino. Que bueno. I can watch his interviews and, learn Spanish while listening to things that interest me. Real practice in any hobby you pick up doesn't have to look academic. It doesn't have to look disciplined in the traditional sense. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly, paying attention, absorbing patterns, and letting your brain do what your brain is going to do. If that doesn't look impressive from the outside, that's fine. The goal isn't to look like you're working really hard. The goal is to become fluent in a language. And if you're looking to build your fluency, I host a library of user-sourced comprehensible input content on my website, Lengualytics. The link is always in the description. But if you want to hear more of my opinions, you can always click the video right up here in this corner. Thank you, and thank you for